Welcome, guys. Mike Sarraille. I'm the CEO of EF Overwatch, which is a talent acquisition firm as well as a talent advisory. Also the founder of Talent War Group. And today we are covering a subject that is dear to my heart. I think it's best summarized as the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, and nobody embodies that more than Dean Stott. Just stick with us and you'll understand why I say that. And for two Navy SEALs, Richard Vinny here, a former teammate of mine, over 20 years in the SEAL teams, and wrote a book called The Attributes, which was released. Are we at the 1 month mark, or is it?
Yeah, we're just over 1 month. Yeah,
over 1 month. It is. He's went on the Lewis House show for the School of Greatness. Rich rolled. This book is picking up steam, and it is good. The Attributes, the 25 hidden drivers to optimal performance. I'll tell you what, Rich, that made me look internal and think about all the things and areas to improve in my life. But Dean, people have called you the ultimate motivation speaker. And I think that almost like cheapens the message that you bring, because motivation is fleeting. And, you can motivate anyone to try to do what you did, but if they don't have that commitment, that relentless pursuit of excellence, and they would have fell far short of what you've accomplished. Since I'm a big Bear Grylls fan, which I think he produces one of the best shows that I enjoy watching next to Shark Week, a quote from him that Dean's relentless determination to help those who face mental health battles is incredible and admirable. He's a hero to many. You are very much in the game of helping people with the mindset of setting goals, and then more importantly, taking the plan to achieve those goals and putting it into action. So, Dean, please, why don't you start by giving the viewers just a summary of your background and what brought you to the point of writing this book?
Yeah, so I was a military man, as you touched on. My father was in the military, and my grandparents were in the military. Not a career I aspired to be as a young boy. However, at the age of 17, when I extended what's supposed to be a 2-week surfing holiday to 6 months and sort of neglected my college, my father, came and found me long before mobile phones. And he was a very stubborn Scottish sergeant major, and very much and I thought just to silence him, I'd tell him I would join the military. And I was expecting some warm, comforting words back, but I was actually met with a response of, "You would last 2 minutes." And for me, I thought, well, there's no point in trying to argue with him, because he's going to prove it. So I thought the best way to do that is through action. And so I went to this and I joined the military at the age of 17. I joined the engineers as my father. Thought I would be only in for 3 years, get as much as I could from the military, and then move on. But actually, when I got there, at the age of 17, by the age of 21, I was a para commando, a diver, and a PTI. I'd done every arduous course that I could within the core of the engineers. And I think for me was, I wasn't the best at PT. I just had the right manner or the right approach. And once I passed one course, you got confident. You're confident in your own abilities. I was also growing as an individual, growing as a man as well. I mean, it was almost like, well, what's next? I mean, that's all I do. I didn't have aspirations of going to special forces. I thought, well, what was next? It was the commando forces. And once I was in commando forces, it was the recce forces. And before you know it, you're then pretty much being funneled in a direction where the only option to you is special forces. So obviously, coming from an army background, my natural progression would be the Special Air Service. But I'd spent 8 years with Free Commander Brigade, and I was also at this point the senior dive instructor. So for me, the Special Boat Service was the natural fit. So much to the disgust of my friends in the SAS, that's what I did. I went for selection there. Again, sort of met with white noise. Why are you doing it? You shouldn't be doing it, and things like that. And you just compartmentalize that and then use that as fuel and energy to prove them wrong. And that's what I did. 6 months later, very fortunate, passed selection and became one of the first army guys to do that. And I think now 15% of the Special Boat Service come from army candidates. So you're almost, opening the doors for others. I joined at a time at a height of war and terror, pretty much, we had Afghanistan, we had Iraq, we were rescuing hostages off the east coast of Africa. It was a busy, busy time. So for me, I'd reached the pinnacle in my career. But for me, where I was more comfortable is working alongside like-minded individuals, other driven individuals who wanted to better themselves and challenge themselves. And so I was very much comfortable in that unit. And then, unfortunately, I sustained a parachuting accident, exiting the aircraft. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep on a hey-ho jump. So, unfortunately, that shortened my career, and everything I'd known, from a young boy growing up in that environment and 16 years in the military was this environment. And it was almost, thank you for your time. It's time to leave. For me, what I was actually going through at the time, and only now on reflection, is what's known as an identity crisis. I'd gone from working in a tight-knit unit, knowing what I was doing day in, day out for the next 2 years, having a role, having a purpose, to now, where do I now fit in society? Where will my skill sets take me? And to add to the pressure, my wife was 8 months pregnant as well. So, without sounding like Liam Neeson, people with our skill sets, is the private security industry. So, so that's what I did. I then headed off to it, and within 48 hours, I was in Libya during the Arab Spring. And for me, I wasn't really comfortable just joining a security company. I wanted to find a niche. A lot of my friends were working on the east coast of Africa because piracy was at its peak. And I soon identified that a lot of these larger private securities were charging 6-figure sums for crisis management and evacuation plans when there was actually nothing in place. So I came home, my wife gave birth to our daughter Molly, and I took the initiative, went back in. There was a huge proliferation of weapons, and I bought 30 weapons off the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, and just set about making my own plans and selling them to the corporates. I did that, and within the security industry, it's very diverse. When you tell people you're in the security industry, I think they think you're a doorman from the local nightclub. It's everything from surveillance, close protection, consultancy, coaching and mentoring, and things like that. We have a vast range of skill sets. So, it ranges from taking UAE's Royal Family Super Lot from Barcelona to Maldives, training the Kurdish Special Forces. The next phone call, you're in Somalia, Yemen, or you're in a 5-star hotel in London covering the Olympics. It was very, very vast. But I was actually learning a lot more about these regions and these cultures, which I wasn't really getting to see when I was in the military, because you had a role, you had a purpose there. You didn't get to see the atmospherics and physically what was going on in some of these countries. So actually I was doing some more sensitive jobs as a private security operator because I wasn't governed by rules of engagement and government restrictions than I was when I was in. So 2011, September 11, 2012, your American ambassador got killed in Benghazi. I was there that evening, and I got 8 German engineers safely from Benghazi to Tripoli, which then put me on the radar of the Canadian embassy 2 years later when they were in Tripoli during the Tripoli War. And I was asked if I can come in and assist them as a private security operator, and that's what I did. I came in, did all the recce, spoke to the local elders, and assisted them getting 18 military and 4 diplomats safely back to Tunis. So I'd now found a niche, or found my role within the private security sector. But chapter 16 in the book is called Dead or Divorced. This was the stage we're at now. My wife soon highlighted to me I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. And so she said, something needs to change. And so I at that point, I then hung up my private security boots, and then worked with my wife, who was a property developer at this point. And you can imagine with my backstory, sat in these architects and planners meetings, I wasn't really interested in the drawings, the heating system or the plumbing system. It was more the coffee and the biscuits. So about, I think it's a month before my 40th birthday, I thought I want to set myself a challenge. I think, as you guys rightly know, in the military, we're very mission driven and objective driven. My mission was now over in the private security sector, and it's like, what is my next mission, my next objective?
Dean, let's step back because you just unwrapped a lot, and I'm not going to let you off that easy. Because as I read this, Rich and I understand the culture, we understand the Warrior Brotherhood, but you did not have it easy. There was nothing about you being raised that was smooth. I mean, let's unwrap that a little. I mean, one, I know your parents ended up divorced, which I'm sorry to hear. I know at one point you were in a homeless shelter, basically, or the equivalent of defending your sisters at school on a daily basis, and then as you got into the military, you had a very colorful history. I mean, I don't know many people that were in the brig, as we call it in the military. You're going to have to unwrap that, but talk a little about your coming up. I don't want to say the obstacles you faced, but maybe the hardships you had to go through and how that sort of maturated you and developed in terms of the mindset that you had to take all this on.
Yeah, so my parents split up when I was 8. My mum took me and my sisters up north to Manchester. And, as you rightly touched on, we ended up in a homeless shelter in what was known as a ghetto. And it was Moss Side, which was the roughest ghetto in the UK in the mid-80s. I was me and my sister were the only Caucasians in that school. So automatically you're drawing attention to yourself. So it wasn't long before I was fighting, and I then had to move school. My father, actually, he got custody of me and my sisters 2 years later, which is great. He put his career on hold. He got promoted to an RSM and was going to go to Germany. And he said, no, I'm staying here in UK and I want to look after my kids, which, really bode well with me as well. That, especially as a military man myself, what he gave up to have me and my sisters. But I touched on my old man, my dad. Actually, he's very old school. He's about 5'8", short sergeant major, Scottish man. Everyone I know who served with him always said he was fair but firm. When I went to secondary school, his mindset, he dressed me in a blazer with a leather briefcase, but it gave me like a military style haircut. So again, I was drawing attention to myself. So it wasn't long before I was fighting again in the playground. So not out of choice, just purely because of the situation. I got very handy with my hands at an early age, and I joined a boxing team when I was growing up as well. My dad wasn't keen on boxing, but he said, look, you do it until you get beat, and then you stop. And thankfully, I only had about 3 fights, but I didn't get beat. This then, you'd like to think I'd leave my hands in my pockets. Then you then join the military, and I don't know whether it's the testosterone. You're just surrounded by other guys in other units, and everyone's very proud of their cap badges and things like that. So you're in an environment there, and as you rightly put on, I got into trouble. Thankfully, earlier on in my career, only been in about a year. It wasn't later on in my career that had a massive effect. Lost any sort of rank or anything. And I ended up in what is called the Glass House, Colchester Prison. And I spent 56 days in the Glass House. But for me, it's just a bump in the road. I learned from that. I never went back to prison. Everyone said you're just unlucky you got caught, and that was it. But then I recently just done my All Arms Commando course. And so obviously just coming out of prison again, you seem to be shy. You seem to be standing out. They always say be the grey man. I don't think I've ever been the grey man in my life. But they were the Army Minor Unit boxing champions at the time, and they said, "Well, look, you've just come out of prison. You joined the boxing team," and that's what I did. That sort of upbringing sort of got me in a good position later on in my life. Got me into trouble, but it got me in a good position within the unit. But I always say, just learn from your mistakes. As long as you don't do it and repeat it.
But listen, for the audience, let's be fair. You were defending the honor of some wives.
That was it. Yeah.
It went to fisticuffs. Hey, Rich, I got to be honest. If that happened to SEAL teams, we'd probably pat you on the back and say, "Hey, you're going to stand watch for the next 6 months in uniform." We would not have sent you to a military brig.
Yeah, I don't even know if we have a Glass House. That's amazing. Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, Dean, because you're. I mean, there's so much that you have in your story. We could spend 3 or 4 hours talking about it. what, as you wrote the book, which really kind of highlights this whole journey of yours, what were the two things when you were writing about, what are the two things in that whole story that really were that you most enjoyed writing about and kind of unpacking and getting out on the page and the written word? If I were to ask you like two out of the 100 different things you have.
Obviously, because at the time when I wrote the book, I'd already done the bike ride, so people were aware of that, and people were aware that I was in the Special Forces. What I liked about the book was actually talking about my childhood and the military, the stories within the military that get you to that point. You don't join the military and you're Special Forces and you have the mindset. There's a journey, and that journey is from the childhood onwards. You get robust, you get some sort of resilience before you then go through the camp gates, and then they just take you, the military, they're really great, and they then mold you into an individual. What I really like talking about, was the humor of the military. Really get that across in the book, because one of the ethoses of the Special Forces, as you know, is the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, but the other one is humor as well. You need to have a sense of humor, and how you use that in such dark times. So it's really good to get that across. But what I really liked getting across was obviously the instruction. When I joined the military, I used to always look at my peers, and I was almost like a sponge. I was grabbing as much as I could from the right people, and then seeing what was working and what wasn't working. There's two types of instructors. There's those that you respect, you honor, and you'll always remember for the rest of your life, because they had a big part in your life and in your career. I mean, you'll have those that you can't even remember their names, because all their ones were the ones that were shouting. But I did my commando course, my all arms commando course, and I didn't learn anything on my commando course. It was about who was the fittest, who could be the coldest, the longest. But I remembered when I went back as an instructor myself, how I felt as a young soldier, and I didn't take anything away. So I really sort of learned from that, and I sort of changed the way instruction was. And luckily at the time, it wasn't me that changed it. It was the institution that changed it as well. And you're getting so much more, but you still had your instructors that would go out there, scream and shout, and they would get nothing from the students. So I always say, I would always ask of my students. I would always do, what I would ask of my students. So if I had to do press ups, I had to go on, I would do it with them. So that was one thing I really wanted to get across is that instruction, and how you can get the best from those students. Because you always have to remember, you're going to be working with these guys later on. So I really wanted to get that point across as well. Because I think with TV and things that you see, people think actually swearing and shouting is the way of the military, and it's actually not the way it's perceived by certain individuals. Watching Full Metal Jacket probably doesn't help. The day before you're going to join the military, but what I mean, we are grown-ups and we are excellent individuals.
Let's be honest, people's views of the military, if they don't have any family members in the military or they never served, they're shaped by Universal Studios and Warner Brother. I think it's universal, and it comes down to leadership, whether you're in the British military or the U.S. military. When you go through training, you have the enforcers that you talked about that just shout and diminish you. And then you have I almost call them, it's like big brothers or big sisters, who are coaches and mentors, who you're either going to meet the standards or not, but they're cheering you along. They're trying to instill lessons learned on you, teach you both soft and hard skills. But not to get off topic, I saw a recent article by, and I'm blanking on the business news medium, that said right now workers need leaders that are less sergeant majors and more cheerleaders. And that connotation that sergeant majors are not coaches, mentors, and cheerleaders sort of goes to the point that people put the military in the box. But I know we go off subject. Dean, so let's get, you had a storied military career. You made it to the highest tactical level that exists in one of the oldest militaries on earth. And then all of a sudden it's taken away from you. And you went through, I know you went naturally to what defaulted. You went to the thing you knew best, the security industry. And then your wife gave you an ultimatum, which we've all been there. Because at some point, let's be honest, you are sort of selfish Because if your military unit looks at you and says, who wants to deploy? Everyone will raise their hand. And then you go look at the wife and you're like, oh, they're making me deploy. We all know you want to deploy.
Yeah.
But then you chose a goal that was so foreign that very few people do. People are going to default to what is easiest, to what they know. And you picked a goal that just, it still blows me away. Why did you pick that specific goal?
So for me, obviously, when I got injured out of the military, I got to that position in military because my physical robustness, my physical attributes got me in that position. And, to then have that taken away from me, I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't even run 100 meters down road. So, it's that identity crisis. I felt that. So during the period of the private security, that's probably about 5 years now from leaving to where we are at the point in the story. I'd neglected my own physical and mental well-being. I was just so fixated on the work. My injured leg now was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg through muscle wastage. But sort of going back to the family bit, Alana, my wife, we sat down. It was actually all about communication. She thought I wanted to go away, and I thought that she needed me to go away to earn money. So that was a real turning point as well. Is actually when I firstly opened up to her, told her about everything, and that's when she said, "Well, you don't need to go away. Stay at home." So I bought during that period. My leg was obviously losing weight, so I just decided to buy a push bike just from Amazon. I just cycled to and from the office, but straight away, being physically active again, I just felt I had a purpose. I just felt good again, almost like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. So I went to the office, and my wife was like, "You're not interested in this? What are you doing? What do you want to do?" So I said, "Well, I've always fancied doing a world record." And she said, "Well, what in?" And I thought, well, cycling. I knew I had it mentally from what I'd done before. But I thought, well, cycling is good because it's not impacting my knee. So I was obviously thinking, I live in Scotland, maybe southern and northern point of Scotland. My wife then found the world's longest road, which is from southern Argentina to northern Alaska, 14,000 miles. So it's the equivalent of cycling from London to Sydney and then another 4,000 miles. So for me, I thought, perfect. That's the perfect challenge for me. So having only cycled 20 miles, I know some of the viewers may be cyclists. It sounds a bit arrogant. I decided to apply for the world record. And that's what I did. Guinness came back 6 weeks later, said you've been successful on your application. So that was something to keep me physically and mentally engaged. During the period that I left the military, me and my wife do a lot with charity work. We always have done. I was the SBS ambassador for Scotland. I'm an ambassador for the British Legion. So the majority was military charities. And so, I'm going to massively name drop now. So I called a friend who I'd known for 14 years, who's Prince Harry, who's probably one of the biggest philanthropists. So him and I had done a lot of work together in the charity industry. He'd be guest at a few of my events. I had an intelligence fusion cell based in Mozambique and Tanzania to identify, where the ivory trade was going from Africa to the Far East. So we were doing that. And I told him what I was going to do. I was going to cycle this road and, what challenge should we do it for? And there's a big campaign back in the UK called Heads Together, which the focus is on mental health. And I'd seen it firsthand in the military, mental health, but and the issues, but I wasn't aware how big it was throughout the whole of society, be it postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, all the way through to, fully grown adults and the military. So that was it. I then set, that was the campaign message. This was the challenge, the world's longest road, and we're going to raise £1 million. I wasn't a cyclist. My sponsorship marketing team did their SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the only weakness that came back was my arrogance towards the cycling community, which I just then took as a strength again. And I just then reflected back to when I was told I couldn't go on selection to the SPS, I couldn't join the military. I just turned that into positive fuel. And what I knew the military were really good at is that meticulous planning and detail that goes into their operations and stuff like that. And that's what I did. I took a military set of orders and I put it on this project and just crossed out ammunition. And then as I evolved as a cyclist, started learning about cycling, I then introduced that into the plan.
So I have a question I'm dying to ask, although I'll hold on it because there's a couple questions here coming in from the viewers I think we should hit, and they kind of center around this idea of relentless. So before I ask the questions that are being asked, let me just ask you, because relentless is a very powerful word. So what does what does the word relentless mean to you? And then we'll get into these couple questions.
Relentless or the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, to me, don't have to be in the military or in sport. It's the fact that you've given it your one. When I say you're 100%, you're 100%. You as an individual have given it all you can, all you can offer. And if you've done that, then you're relentless in your own pursuit. Don't compare yourselves to others. And the great thing about this, it's not just, as I said, military, sport. It could be in finance, carpentry, music. But you need to set goals. You can't be relentless if you don't have an objective. So that's the key one to get across, because you have to be relentless in the pursuit for something.
So awesome. That segues into this first question. Looks like from Christy. Any tips on how someone can adopt a relentless attitude in their life?
I think tips from the military: having routine. If you have a routine, then that's been, I think, has been relentless. As I say, have a purpose, have something that you want to do. For me, I always pipe on about the importance of physical activity in your mental state. I'm not saying go cycle 14,000 miles. That's ludicrous. But whether it's a physical goal, whether it's a business goal, whether it's a personal goal, put it down. Always put it down on paper. The amount of paperwork I have next to me, set that goal and then set a plan. And once you've got the plan in place, then set a routine. And that itself is being relentless. But don't also worry if it doesn't go to plan. I'll talk about on the bike ride as well. It's good to have a plan. It's also being reactive to the situation, because things don't. As you and I, all three of us know, a span in the wheel doesn't survive first contact. So
that brings up a good point, Dean, because I think and correct, or give us some examples of this. I think I'm going to say this, and I know you'll agree, but part of relentlessness is as you move down the path of a goal, you don't allow yourself to get crushed by the setbacks, right? But you also don't allow yourself to get seduced by the successes, right? Because success has a tendency to bring us off track sometimes as much as challenges. So talk a little bit about how that might have worked in your journey as well.
Yeah, so I think, you're right. Don't get distracted by the success. They're to me distractions, and that's why I just, what is it you're doing? So for the bike ride, for example, my objective is to cycle 14,000 miles. It's not to be a world record holder or the first person in history. That just happened later on. My objective is to ride 14,000 miles. From a personal perspective, it was so I could get fit again. I had my own goal and objective. The other objective is to raise £1 million, and then the impact of that was going to be forever. So I didn't really look around that success. But they're distractions as well. I wasn't at the time. I didn't know about social media as well. And you can easily get distracted with those things. But always just come back to what is the objective, what is our aim, and anything else, just try and ignore. We do the reason me and Mike went and do what we did. It wasn't because we wanted honors and awards. It's because we wanted. It's a job that we loved. We loved doing. You know what I mean? And when people do things for the wrong reasons, or for other reasons, they're doing it for the wrong reasons.
I just want to make a few points here, because when people hear guys like you and Rich speak, that what's happening in the back of their mind from what I hear, what they tell me is like, well, these guys live in a completely different world. They're on a completely different level, and I actually disagree. There was nothing, and I know both of you. I could say you were very much average. When you went into the military, what made you guys uncommon was this mindset. And did the military cultivate that? Yes. Yeah. You chose a lofty goal. Let's be honest, that even as a Navy SEAL, I'm like 14, was it 14,000 miles? No way. No way. But I mean, you broke it into just all these little like micro goals. I mean, you took this big goal and you broke it down. I just need to make it to this. I need to do this much preparation. I need to get this much preparation in on the bike. I know you trained in the UK in order to prepare those 14,000. It's not like you just said, hey, I'm going to go ride the Pan American Highway, and then 1 month later you left without any preparation whatsoever. For somebody listening, I mean, and especially in a world that's bombarded with social media of people showing you what they have and what they've done, how would you tell them to set their goals, and what methodology would you use to approach it?
Yeah, so probably going back, as you touched on the 14,000 miles, as you said, how do you consume that? How do you deal with that mentally? And I sort of took that back from my time in the military. Like, our special forces is 6 months long. You don't start day one thinking about getting your berry and belt 6 months later. All you're thinking about is, what do I need to do today, which gets me on the parade square tomorrow morning? And that's what I did with this challenge. Is I took the 14,000 miles, broke it into countries, broke it into days, and then 4 stages. And I just used to do 2-hour stages and just get off my bike. But I was very disciplined in the timings. It was 30 minutes. Then I was back on the bike. I wasn't having a selfie with a llama or chatting to the documentary team. And then all I would then do is just look at the next 2 hours, because I think if you look beyond that, then you start doubting yourself. Things start creeping in and things like that. And so for me, it was just 4 training sessions a day. It wasn't a world record. Before I'd done it, I'd done a day, I'd done a week, I'd done a world record, and then you start to make headway. But I also made sure as well, which was important in this, is that I hit my objectives for that day. I see other people doing challenges, and they're like, and it's not just in sport, because any sort of business that you're in, it's like, they were 10 miles behind today, and they're like, well, I'll catch that up tomorrow. But you don't know what's going to happen the next day. And you could have another bad day and you'd be 20 to 30 miles behind. And, so at the end of the day, if you're behind your target, it starts creeping in. That little doubt starts creeping in. And so I always made sure I hit my objective. So I was in the right mindset and mind space when I went to bed. I think, very fortunate, the first week I was, because of the winds, I was only 39 miles behind target, but my target was still a week ahead of the world record. So that was the worst position I was in. But as you touched on there, though, with social media, is I just ignore that. Don't compare yourselves to others. A lot of people were saying to me, especially cyclists, oh, I don't think you can do it. I was 90 kilos. I didn't look like an endurance cyclist. I looked like a track cyclist in the velodrome. But again, there's no point in me arguing. They don't know me. I know myself and my own abilities. So I always say, don't be distracted, because social media, part of it's all fiction. It's just there to gloss up. You don't know what's behind that camera. So don't be distracted by that social media. But for me, it was, I knew what I was capable of. I just needed to be tested. And the start, the world record was 117 days. I was aiming for 110. How it then evolved and changed throughout, it was totally different. But again, the planning wise, you touched on there, I looked at the countries that I was going through. The Atacama Desert, it was 47 degrees centigrade for a week with no shade. So Alaska was minus 18. I was trying to replicate those scenarios before I went on the challenge, just so I rather than going on the challenge, sort of, as we know, in the military, we're very lucky. We've been to the desert, the Arctic, the jungle, but we haven't done it on a bike for 10 hours. So I needed to test myself and put myself under duress before the challenge, rather than taking a gamble with the challenge. But one thing I'm quite proud of is the fact that I'd spoken to the previous record holders. They'd all gone from the north to the south. And one thing we do in UKSF is, before we, as you guys will do as well, when you come off the ground, before you clean your weapon, before you go do anything else and wash yourself, we do what's a hot debrief. And the 3 questions are: what worked, what didn't work, and if you were going to do it again, what would you do differently? So we're always learning, always evolving. We all make mistakes, just don't make that mistake again. So I asked those questions to the previous record holders, because they were the guys that had been there and done it. So they physically have been there, and they all went from the north south. But all their issues were in South and Central America, be it bureaucracy from the border, the languages, the spares for the bike. So from a military perspective, from my background, I thought, well, why take a gamble with the second half of that challenge? Why would you not address those issues early, get them out the way, and then when you get into America, you can see where you are. So one thing I'm quite proud of is I did that. I just turned it on its head. Just because everyone else went north-south didn't mean it was the right decision.
So, man, this is good, and you're answering a bunch of questions actually as you talk. So, which is great. First thing I'll do is I'll agree with Mike. I mean, I have trouble doing 14,000 miles on an airline seat, let alone a bicycle seat. So, Tom Hall asked about how the mental stress and preparation from serving in the SBS helped prepare you for the mental strain, and I think you answered that. And just to kind of paraphrase a little bit, taking things in chunks, planning it out. trying to get the hard stuff over first. Like kind of there's a saying, called "eat the frog" first, right? I mean, you do the hard stuff first, right? So I think that answers that. Great question from Kevin. I want to go back to here because it's probably burning on guys like me and Mike's head because we wrote books kind of about this stuff, right? But do you feel you were born with the relentless drive, or was it cultivated through the military or life? And can others who don't have that level of drive achieve it?
Yeah, I don't think I was born with it. I think, I always believe, for me, I've talked about my father. For my own thing, I always wanted to impress my father. So that was my own sort of thing. My father was very much he was what we call a tracksuit soldier. He wasn't a career soldier. He played soccer. He was the army manager. So that competitive drive I got from him. But I think my time in the military cultivated me into that. And as I touched on before, I was just learning from other people what was working, what wasn't. And there's a great phrase: you can't be experienced without experiences. Everything from my time in the military and private security, all those experiences that I'd done and been through, I sort of took a snippet, something from that. I learned something from that. I mean, it was all then brought together into this challenge. The experience about experiences is a key one. We talk about it with the Talent War Group. The military is an organization that no other corporation could replicate. They have put us in positions in high octane environments, making decisions, life-changing decisions. And so from that, we've got that. That's where you start to build up that relentlessness. It's from what you've done before. So I think that I don't think you're born with it. I think it sort of evolves. And for me, like I said, in the military, once I did one course or tour, I then learned from that, and then what was it I can do next? And then I was almost like a sponge.
The other part of Kevin's question, which I think is really interesting, is how do you temper that drive without being abrasive to others? And I think we get this because sometimes you can come across as someone who's just pushy, arrogant. So how would you talk about tempering that level of drive, which is somewhat inhuman compared to some people who would look at you? How would you do that?
Yeah, I did actually. The reason I laughed out loud about the arrogance. So we used to have what we call a confidential report, which is, as you would know, you would have written it for your guys, how they're doing their performance. And I think pretty much every year mine was like, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. But for me, I was like, well, no, if you're good at it, then be proud of it. Yes, but as you said, don't be abrasive. Don't rub other people's noses in it. If you are good at it, be good at it. But then also wash off on others. Take others with you. Don't just stand there on your own and say, well, I'm better than your guys. Get them up to your level as well. And that's one thing I was really keen on. Anyone, in my patrols, at the dive school, on the commander course, I had a competitive drive and I liked to succeed, but you can't succeed on your own. And I used to try and bring my team with me. So I think that's where you don't come across abrasive. If you stand alone and say, look at me, this is me, and things like that, no one's really interested. But if you bring them with you, then that obviously tempers that.
I've often heard the difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence is I know I can do this, and arrogance is I'm better than you, right? So I think that's such a good point. I mean, to bring in other people to kind of understand that, hey, this is a team effort. Everybody feels a part of it, which I'm sure was your case. The other thing I want to touch on here, and I'm going to ask this burning question because I really want to, but the other thing I want to touch on is something you said about not comparing yourself to others. And I think this is really important for anybody who is going to be relentless and going to be setting goals. A friend of mine always tells me, he says, hey, you know how you spot the pioneers? They're the ones with arrows in them. Okay. And it's because they're the ones out front doing stuff. There's no one to compare yourself to when you are out pioneering, when you're doing things like that. And so there's no point. And if you find yourself comparing yourself to others, you need to, I think, do some introspection and ask yourself why that is. You may not be pioneering, but I think you make a great point. I mean, you were doing something that in some cases other cyclists had done, but you said, hey, I'm not going to compare myself. I'm going to get their lessons learned, but really I'm going to chart my own path. I'm going to pioneer this thing, which is really important for the relentless attitude, I think, and something I wanted to highlight that you said. Here's my question, and then I'll give it back to Mike. identity. I'm fascinated with identity. Probably write my next book on it, to be honest with you, because that's how fascinated I am with it. And you talk about identity crisis and how, you know, you came out of this one identity and you kind of had to figure it out. So as you've gone through this process, you left, you know, the service, and then you found yourself in the contracting world, and then you found yourself riding bikes. And what is your identity now?
I'm always a soldier. I'm first a soldier. I just know when I can be the Dean from the military. I think, you know, I do a lot with transition when I talk to a lot of people, and guys and girls when they leave the military, you know, tend to have real issues with their, you know, settling into the civilian sector. It's, you know, what, you know, and they're always like, you know, they don't understand, you know, this world here doesn't understand me. When in fact, one thing I really got to first, which is probably going off the question slightly, is the fact that there's nothing wrong with this community, the civilian community. It's us that are unique. We're the unique ones, and we need to fit into their world. So my identity is I am still Dean Stott from the military. I just have now quickly adapted and understand how my message can be promoted to the civilian world, if that makes sense. But anyone who knows me, I'm still Stotty. I'm still the troublemaker. You know, half of them, you know, some of the messages I get from my friends are like, how you are, where you are. But I think you have to have character. You know, the military is about characters. You know, we talk about going to prison and things like that. And I always used to say to guys, who would you rather step off the helicopter with? You know what I mean? Is it the camp commando who can polish his boots best, or is it, you know, the guy who's got a bit of character and a bit of robustness? But there's a time and a place for that, though. And it's knowing when to pull that out and when to put it away.
I think the biggest, my question is to both of you guys. I mean, Rich, drive is something that you wrote about in the attributes, is, again, for a normal person like me, who hasn't, let's say, gone under special operations training. How do you set on the path to build that? Let's say a single mom, you know, caring for 2 kids. I mean, how does she set about going about building drive and all these other attributes that Dean, you and Rich clearly have?
Go ahead. Do you want to go, Rich? Or
Yeah, I'll start it off. So first of all, I'm gonna repeat Dean for a second, and I will say that goal setting is number one. I mean, drive cannot start without some sort of destination that's hopefully written down, but you know where you want to go. I think an important part of drive, and I'll challenge Dean a little bit on that. I think we are endowed with a little bit of this in terms of just the attributes we bring to the table, whether it's self-efficacy or discipline or open-mindedness. Those types of things help us along the path. Some of us have a little bit more coming into the game than others. If you find yourself a little bit less on it, I think the idea is to actively develop those. Like, how can I develop more self-efficacy? It's really a combination of confidence, initiative, and optimism, right? Those 3 things, you know, combined are self-efficacy. So how can I gain confidence? And I think these giving yourself little challenges, little goals, you know, little things to achieve, to start building confidence. And by the way, to start out on those and just get the ball going on any one of those goals takes initiative, and it takes an optimism, you know, balanced with a realism, saying, hey, I know that I don't have all the answers, but I know that once I hit a challenge, I'll get through. So you can develop self-efficacy that way. You can develop open-mindedness by just staying open-minded, being curious. If you don't find yourself naturally curious, then just become curious. Ask yourself, hey, I wonder about this. I wonder about that. I wonder about this person. I wonder about this goal. And then discipline. You know, discipline is about, like we just talked about, understanding as you practice these small goals, setting a plan. This is the plan I want to, you know, that I think I'm going to execute to get from point A to point B. And then be resolute in the outcome, but be flexible and adaptable with the pathway. Because the pathway, like Dean said, is going to change along the way. And as it changes, it'll either feel like a setback, which you have to power through, or it'll feel like a win, which you can't get seduced by. So I think those ways, just smaller things, are some of the ways I'd recommend doing it.
You know, Dean, as I read your book, it struck me. One of the things we all know, you know, we used to ask the young SEAL officers as we're putting them through the junior officer training course, or SQT before they go to a SEAL team is what's the most important piece of information on the battlefield. And of course, they're going to say where the enemy's at or where the target is. It's actually where you're at. It's where you're at in life. And I think what a lot of people fail, and I'll let you guys segue onto this if you have anything to add, is they don't know where they're currently located. And if you don't know where you're currently located, much like in business, if you don't have a scoreboard, if you say, here's our current cash position, we need to get to this cash position, you can't really set goals. Or the goals you set, if you don't know where you're located, are completely ambiguous, and hence you're setting yourself up for success. Think about it this way. From what I've seen is somebody who wants to lose weight, let's say they're weighing in at 275 pounds and they want to get to 225, is they just say, hey, I want to get to 225, and they don't set those small goals to set them up for victory. That's a lofty goal, moving from 275 to 225. Or if you're a business trying to increase revenue from 1 million to 1.5. From the people you've worked with, have you guys noticed that, or what are your sort of stances on measuring your goals? I mean, John Doerr talked about this in Measure What Matters.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you and Rich are touching on there. It's all about chipping away. You have your aim. I use you talked about someone losing weight. I always use it on examples about, if I was to tell someone they're going to do a London run a marathon tomorrow, they tell me all the reasons why they can't do it, rather than all the reasons they can. But as Rich has mentioned there, if they tried and ran that 26 miles today and failed, then that's them. Their whole morale is low, their self-confidence is low, and everything else. But if you then set a goal of, say, 4 miles, and they hit that, that builds them up. They feel positive, and it's achievable, it's manageable. I mean, it's like, right, what's next? Next is the 5 mile. Let's do that. Before you know it, you then build yourself up. So it's just taking, whether it's in business, whether it's in sport, or whatever you're doing, is looking at the target. And that's not your end goal. It's then breaking it down into mini goals as well. And as I said on my bike ride before, I did a day, did a week, did a country, and did a world record. So that's very important, I think.
And I'll just add to that, because this is neurologically and neuroscientifically backed. Okay, because what happens when you set a goal and then you achieve it is you get a dopamine. The neurotransmitter dopamine hit, right? And this happens when you step into discomfort and fear. Our brains are wired. As soon as you decide to utilize the fight response, which is step into my fear, you get a dopamine hit. You get rewarded. We are evolutionarily designed to step into discovery and challenge. That's how we've gone from cave dwellers to space explorers, right? So when Dean talks about setting these goals, you're setting yourself up for neurological rewards, and like Dean says, you have to set it based on your own kind of desire and kind of meaningful steps, right? It could be, if you want to run a marathon and you can't run to the end of your street, or even do your mailbox, you say, well, the first step is I'm going to buy some running shoes. That's a goal. That might mean something to you. You do it. Then once you come, say, next morning, I'm going to get up and I'm going to put on those running shoes. That's goal number 2, right? Then the next morning, I'm going to put them on. I'm going to walk down the mail. I mean, whatever those little steps. And this is where military training, I think Dean and Mike will really agree. This is how you get through things like SPS training or Navy SEAL training. You are wired to basically move your horizon to whatever you need to in the moment to step through. If you're freezing the surf zone, you're focused on the next 10 seconds. If you're running on the beach, you might be focused on the end of the berm. If you're doing whatever, you might be focused on the next meal or whatever that is. And this is Dean on the 14,000 mile bike ride, which is insane, by the way. Man, that's so cool. This is breaking it up into whatever it took that day, whether it was 37 miles in one day, whether it was the mile uphill that you were trying to accomplish because it just sucked, So take charge of your own neurology and give yourself those rewards.
Rich, I do remember the best piece of advice I got from somebody before I went into Buzz is they said, just make it to the next meal. You make it to breakfast, you've got a few evolutions, just focus on making it to lunch and breaking it down. I know for people that just kept their eye on graduating as a SEAL and didn't break it into those micro goals, ended up going away. So valuable points, guys. So Dean, I got to ask, I know that your wife got a phone call during the middle of the ride and said, hey, I would really like to go to this event. Come on, did that play? Did you pick up your game?
Yeah, well, I had to. So I said the world record was 117 days. I was always aiming for 110, and I'd already taken the South America world record by 10 days. So I'd done that in 48 days. I got into Mexico on day 70, and I was 14 days ahead of the target. So I was like, perfect. I can take a day's rest here or there. My wife was the campaign director. She was very good in running the campaign around me, keeping all those distractions away from me. But actually, so I'd got into Texas and I had 5 missed calls off my wife. So my first concern, there was something wrong with our children. So I got off the phone and I rang my wife, and she said, we've been kindly invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding, which changed the dynamics completely of the whole challenge. For me to get home for this challenge, I had to be finished by day 102, which is 15 days ahead of the world record. And going into the phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind. So yes, it's nice to be invited to something like that, but I was cursing for the first couple of hours. But that's when I got to Lubbock the next day with 60-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes. So I was grounded for another 24 hours. So I was now 2 days behind my new target. So this is where we talk about the planning and changing the planning. So I just sat down and I put pen to paper. I had to cycle 340 miles in the next 36 hours to miss the next weather window. And I just played chess with Mother Nature, with the winds. Thankfully, in America, I could cycle at night. I didn't have that luxury back in South and Central America. And I covered North America. It was supposed to be 17 days originally. I cycled in 11 and a half days. Got to Canada, got a week outside, and I thought, perfect. The wedding secure, this world record secure. I then got made aware of a professional cyclist who had just come out on social media that day. He's sponsored by Red Bull, all the brands, that he was going to cycle the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man to do it 100 days. So I thought, great. So the objective was still there, but my timeline had changed. So I cycled for 22 hours in the last 30 hours in -18 to make sure that I came in under there and not only break the world record, but then become the first man in history to do it under 100 days. So we talk about the importance of planning. It's very important to have planning, but the success of this challenge was being reactive to the situation as it occurred to me. But thankfully for me, I was in a position when I heard about the wedding, when I heard about Michael, the cyclist, that I was in a position that I could act on it. I do, people ask the question, what if you'd known that from the start? Would it be too much to comprehend? Would the target be just too much? Would you have not taken rest days? You push yourself too hard. You just don't know. Hindsight is a great thing, but for me, I was just in a position where I could act on it, and I just changed the plan all the way to the very end.
Was the wedding worth it?
Yeah, the wedding was worth it. I wish I'd had time to reflect on what I'd done and what I'd achieved, because it was only 2 days after getting back. And so you'd spent 3.5 months on your own on a bike, and next thing you got the world's media on you. And I joke aside, I joke, when I got back to where I lived up in Scotland, the first question was, how was the wedding? I was like, really? I've just done. We raised over $1.2 million for mental health as well, which was amazing. The world record is great. Yes, that's a personal thing for me, but what was more important was that. But yeah, the wedding was good, but I wish I had a little bit of time to appreciate what I'd done.
Rich, do you have anything left for Dean, or we'll start wrapping this up?
Dude, I don't. I'm just proud to know you, proud to be involved, and you are an inspiration to all of us. And listen, you kind of said this in the periphery, and I think it's a common trait for all of guys like us. And so what people might not know is, it doesn't matter if you're a Navy SEAL, if you're SBS, if you're Australian, it doesn't matter what country. All of us are this. We get out and we start meeting each other overseas, and we're all the same, right? We have different accents, and we make fun of those accents, of course. Yeah. But we're all the same. And one of the common denominators between all of us is we all strive to consistently try to surround ourselves with people who we feel are better than us. And that's a key trait. What's interesting is that you think that, yet the guy next to you is thinking that about you. And it's kind of this mutual respect that goes on. So I certainly think that about you, my friend. Thanks for this. It's a pleasure to be on this team with you.
No, likewise. Yeah, and it's an honor to be part of the Talent War Group. Like you said, I think the same with you guys. I think So should I have a seat here? And you're probably all thinking the same. But being right around like-minded individuals and just sharing our knowledge and experience to others. And this is the great thing about the Talent War Group.
Well, I've got to say, even reading this, Rich, I think you're right. I feel like I haven't accomplished enough in life. So I'm looking for the next challenge, which for the three of us, we're about to kick off something called the Everyday Warrior Project. It's in the final stages of being wrapped up, and it's going to launch in the next few months here. And I know we're going to take on some fun challenges and push our I don't know how to describe our aging bodies that are full of injuries, and what used to be easy for us in the 20s, 30s are not so easy anymore. But Dean, what's next for you? I know there's a challenge, and I don't know if you can talk about it.
Yeah, I can.
But,
yeah.
Okay.
No, I can. Yeah. And so for me, my USP is, the feedback from the book was, there's two things that I'm doing. The feedback from the book was, great endurance thing, but you are the security expert. Why are you still not in the industry? So very much in the background, I'm still doing a lot of security consultancy because I need to still feed my family and fund these mad hobbies. But my USP compared to others is, I'm not a cyclist. I've enjoyed cycling. So my USP is I'll take a sport or discipline I've never done before. So I've been arrogant towards the cycling community. I'm now going to be arrogant towards the kayaking community. And so my plan is to kayak the River Nile, the world's longest river from source to sea. It's never been done before, from Rwanda all the way to the Mediterranean. So 4,280 miles. So I set off on the 1st of February in 2022. But the great thing about this is there isn't a world record yet. I haven't got an objective to hit, but the Africans are going to be really key in helping me on this as well. It's using those locals to get me to the end. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Well, I'm excited to see how that shapes up, and to watch you go through that and support you through that. Well, guys, Dean, where can people pick up the book? I know there's some nuances with the. Oh, look at that. Who do we got joining you?
This is young Tommy. So this. I'll put your shoes on. Yeah, sorry. My identity. You said I'm also a father. So,
of course.
Where can people pick up the book? Where can they follow you?
You can pick up the book on Amazon, audio and Kindle, and then I think in May for the American listeners it will be Target, Barnes and Noble, and everywhere else. So, but it's out there at the moment.
Got it. And likewise, I know everyone can pick up Rich's book, The Attributes, anywhere books are sold. Hey guys, thank you for joining us. For all our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us again. No better, example of the relentless pursuit of excellence than Dean Stott and Rich Davinia. I know these guys personally. I'm humbled to be surrounded with them, and they make me better. Again, this has been brought to you by Talent War Group. Again, I am humbled that we've put together such a great group of speakers, guys. And if you're looking for a speaker for your company's next event, go to talentwargroup.com. You can book any of these guys. And we will be back. We'll be bringing more content next week with the LinkedIn live sessions. So for all of you, be relentless. Get after it. Thanks, guys.